Hey class, Prof JC here, and I hope that your summer is going well and the warm weather is starting to show itself a little bit more consistently, and so I hope that you're having a great summer, even with the classes and with the homework that you're taking. I'm excited about what we're going to talk about today, just because it kind of gives us another way of looking at this this thing that we're talking about all summer, which is purpose. How do we find purpose? Is it important that we find purpose? What are ways that we find purpose? And so I'm trying to make sure that what we're doing is as research-based as possible, as fact-based as possible. And so I found I found some statistics on purpose. And so I thought that they would be good for us to see. They'd be good for you to see as you're formulating your own thoughts around this idea of purpose and what your purpose is and where you're going. I can't stress this enough. I just have to say, I think the research shows us from an organizational and a personal perspective, understanding what your purpose is, whether it's for you, for your team, for your organization, understanding that is a very important factor in whether you're going to be able to move forward with the focus perspective. And focus is, as we get into, class here in just a few weeks, I've got a video that I want you to watch, and it has nothing to do with me. It's a guy who talks about this idea of focusing your life. Focusing your life is going to be one of the most important things that you can do, but you got to know what you're focusing on. Okay. And so purpose is, and I hope you're beginning to see that for those in the class that may not really have an understanding of what your purpose is, it is so important to where you're going to go into the success that you're going to have. And I want all of you to be successful in whatever way that looks to you. Okay. It's going to look different for all of us, but this idea of purpose, it's so central, right? And my personal belief is that there's no success in life, there's no success in business, there's no success in the organization or leadership unless you know your purpose, your vision, and your mission, right? These things are so important to where you're trying to get to, okay? So more on purpose, let's talk about this. And I just thought that these facts were a little bit interesting. So I got these facts from, it's called Greater Good Magazine. And it's inside the magazine, and you can read this, it's online. These are science-based insights for a meaningful life. So this group that does it, and the group that does it, you might be surprised to know, it's actually sponsored by Berkeley, the University of California, Berkeley. And so I've done some other studies with them, or I've read some other studies and used some other studies specifically around gratitude. So they did a whole study on gratitude and really looked at it from a science perspective. And I've used that a lot in some of my teachings and some of my work, especially with corporate clients, talking about this issue of gratitude. But these guys are based at the Greater Good Science Center. And again, it's at the University of California, Berkeley. So this is nothing to sneeze at. It's not, these aren't Prof JC's opinions here. This is based on science from a really great school. Okay. So they're looking at this idea of purpose, and what they came up with is they just gave some stats on it. Okay. So I just want to walk through the stats, and here's how this assignment is going to work. Okay. So we're going to walk through the different slides, and after every slide or after every section, there's going to be just a group of questions, one question, two questions, whatever on a slide. Your job is to do this. I want you to choose 3 of the slides, okay? 3 of the sets of questions that we're going to go through and answer those. And then everyone needs to answer the last slide, okay? So out of the slides I'm going to show you, just choose 3 of them and just answer the question that I have for you. These are more reflective in nature, but everyone's got to answer the question to the final slide. But the other ones, you get to choose which ones you want to answer, okay? So let's dive in. Facts on purpose. Here's kind of what the article had to say. To highlight the topic and give people a chance to explore their sense of purpose, the Greater Good Science Center created an online purpose in life quiz drawing on self-report questionnaires from published psychological science research. So again, this is science-backed, it's data, okay? since it was posted in late February 2021, so this has been a little bit of time, about 3 years since this happened. Now watch this. Just under 74,000 people have answered all 14 questions. So that's a really good data set. It's not like they said, hey, we talked to 500 people and this is what we came up with. Just under 74,000 people. And here are some patterns that they see in the results. And this is what we're going to look at today. Okay. Now watch this. So here's the first thing that we're going to look at today. Okay. Women report more purpose in life than men. Okay, so that's interesting to see, as tends to be the pattern with nearly every GGSC quiz. Women scored higher than men. People who identified as gender non-binary reported lower purpose than people who identified as either women or men. Okay, I'm not going to touch that one, but this is an important thing for us to see. So here's the data that we see on it. Here's the actual chart that we can see from it. Scoot myself over here so I'm not taking up the entire picture here. So we can see there, clearly female and women, 2.96 there on a 3-point scale. The men, male and man, it's a little bit less, 2.87. Gender non-binary, 2.69. That's interesting. It would be interesting if we had a class, if we were in a class, to dive into that and just look at that. Not judging, not from a perspective of saying there's anything, that's not my job. I'm not here to do any of that, right? But just to have that question, why is it that gender non-binary, that people who report themselves gender non-binary, that they would have a lower form of purpose or report a lower sense of purpose in life than a female or a male. And then those who prefer, I prefer to self-identify, okay, 2.87 as well. So women clearly win this one out. Okay, so here's the first question from you to choose for you to choose from when it comes to your assignment this week. What could be 3 reasons? So I just want you to think about this. Okay, now be careful on this one. Okay, but what could be 3 reasons that women report more purpose than men and non-binary? Okay, what could be? Now you can do some data research on this if you want to. You might be able to find more in the article, but that might be something that somebody out there wants to research a little bit and say, why is it that women do report more purpose than men do? So that's just something for us to think about. Okay, so that's the first question here. Purpose in life grows with time. Now, this was surprising to me. Confirming popular ideas about wisdom later in life, I do agree with that. That the older we become, the more experiences we have in life, the more wise we become. Why? Because we've got more experiences. And in agreement with several studies that have reported increasing purpose with age, GGSC quiz results showed persistent increases in purpose with each decade of life. Now watch this, okay? So under 18 reports about 2.86, and now we're on a scale of about 3.5 here, okay? Is kind of our max up there. 18 to 29, not much. 30 to 39, a little bit more. 40 to 49, people start to really sense that. That's my age category right there. 50 to 59, more. 60 to 69, and 70 or over actually are the ones who have a greater sense of purpose the older that they become, okay? And so here's our question that I want you to think about here. Why do you think, okay, so just do some reflection on this, okay? You don't have to find data or anything behind this, but why do you think purpose grows over time as a purpose has less time on planet Earth? I would think, okay, if I go back here to the scale, I would think that maybe it actually starts more at 18, right? People are ideological, they're in college, they're at that age where they're discovering new things, and so they're trying to figure out what their career is. My thought was that more people are focused in on their purpose at earlier stages of life than they are at later stages of life. And I found this to be true even in the classes that I teach, this class that I teach on purpose. it's a little more difficult with the younger students. I have found students in their 18, and we have a lot of students in their 30s, in that 30 to 39 range. It's a little more difficult for the younger people in classes in their 20s to talk about this idea of purpose. There was one particular class I'm thinking about. I went hard in the paint on this idea of purpose, and they stared at me like I had three eyeballs. It just didn't, it wasn't registering with them. And maybe that's because I'm a little bit different. I've kind of, ever since I was a kid, I've always had this drive to do something with my life, something hopefully big, something good. And I'm still at 45, still pursuing, still trying to go after that. So it's confusing to me to talk, to hear people in their 18 to 20s that, that don't really understand this idea of purpose. But this is what the facts show. It's not just people at Point Loma. It's everywhere. Okay. So again, the question could be, and I just want you to think about that, is why do you think purpose grows over time as a person has less time on planet Earth versus the person who's got all the time in the world and who should be thinking about purpose? Okay. Um, and maybe another question just for you to think about is, should this be reversed, where people in their 18 to 20s and 30s and 40s should really be thinking more about purpose, and people in later years should be able to just relax and know that it's all been taken care of. So that was interesting to me. I'd be curious to know what your thoughts are about this. Here's another one when it comes to ethnic backgrounds. Okay, the differences in GGSC purpose quiz scores related to ethnic background were smaller than differences associated with other factors that we analyzed, with all falling within 1/10 of a point on the scale. Scores from people who identified as white, Latino, and multi-ethnic were higher than those from people who identified as Asian, followed by people who identified as African American and Middle Eastern. Okay. There were too few people in the Native American ethnic group to make a meaningful conclusion about the score relative to other ethnic backgrounds. So here's what we see. Here's what the data shows us. Okay. So when we look at this idea of purpose, okay, here are the ethnic backgrounds and kind of what they think when it comes to purpose, how they report, purpose and their sense of purpose. So obviously you go all the way over there to the right-hand side of the screen, you see multi-ethnic, that's 2.92. But then the largest one on the scale, you've got Latino, American, Chicano, and then you come down, you start stair-stepping down. You got the European American at 2.95, Native American. That was interesting because they said that they didn't record too much on Native American, but they have it recorded here as 2.93. And then it comes down to Asian America, 2.90, African American, 2.85. The Middle Eastern kind of and African American are about the same. So that's just something for you to think about. And here's the question. Okay, now watch this. Okay, so this was interesting to me. Again, this data, these facts on purpose, as I was going through them, were very interesting to me. Okay, they didn't go in the direction I thought that they were actually going to go. So as we see here, Latino, okay, Latino America, Chicano, that group right there scores the highest when it comes to purpose. Now I want you to watch this. Okay, now this is done by the Pew Research here. Okay, white and Asian households have vastly more wealth than other households. Okay, so median wealth of U.S. households in December. So this is December 2021. So almost around the same time that this article was or that the research was done for this article back in 2021. All this comes out as well. So what we see here is when it comes to white and Asian households, these are the wealthier households here in the United States. Okay. On the lower end, what you see are Hispanic and Black. Okay. Now, don't get upset with me about this. Number one, I'm Afro-Latino. Okay. So I don't want to hear it. I can talk about this and I'm not getting offended. I don't need for you to get offended as well and email me and all that kind of stuff. Just this is data. This is how it is. For better, for worse, this is the data. Okay. So here's the question I have for us as I see that, right? My thinking would be people with more money, people with more means, sense of means, would have a greater sense of purpose. But what we're seeing is that this isn't true. So here's the question I want to ask for you. Okay. Hispanic Latinos are historically much lower income than white Asian ethnicity with less resources. Okay. I want you to think about this, especially if you have a Latino background. Okay. With less resources, why do you believe Hispanic Latino rates so high in reporting purpose? And again, it was more of a shock to me. I thought it would be different. I thought people with more means, more money, more access to education, all this kind of stuff, I thought they would report a higher sense of purpose. Why? Because they're educated. Why? Because they have more money so they can think about these kind of things. But that's not the case. Okay. Why do you believe that this is the case? Okay. And then maybe the flip side is that why would people with more means, right? The white and Asian populations, why do they report a lower sense of purpose in life when you've got the Latinos who are reporting the highest? So just something for us to think about. Okay. Now for our next one, more schooling, more purpose. Okay. Consistent with many studies about the importance of education and purpose in life, we found that purpose rose with educational attainment. This reflects the formative role that learning, knowledge, professional identity, and work experience play in discovering what drives our sense of purpose in life. When it comes to acting in accordance with and being recognized for efforts that reflect and validate our sense of purpose in life, higher educational credentials allow us to follow our passions. Okay. Now, again, this kind of goes back to what I was thinking earlier. People with more access to money, access to wealth, access to education are going to report a higher sense of purpose, as we saw in the last couple of slides. Black and Latinos are consistently lower on the income ratio, yet they report the highest sense of purpose. So again, I wish we were in a class so we could talk about this, because this would be fascinating. Here's what I have found. Okay. Now I'm not saying this overarching, but here's what I've seen just in my time at Point Loma, my time teaching. It does tend to be in classes even that the Latino students that I have typically want to talk a little bit more about this idea of purpose, maybe than other ethnicities that are in the class as well. I have seen that to be the case. So that's an interesting one. Okay. So here's the data on this one when it comes to education. People who didn't finish high school, 2.76. People who have a high school diploma, 2.71 out of 3.50. Associate's degree, a little bit higher, 2.78. Bachelor's degree, a little bit higher, 2.86. Did some graduate work, 3.03. And now watch this, it jumps up even more with graduate or professional degrees. Okay. So maybe this is why I'll say this, and maybe some of you relate on the call. I'm Afro-Latino. I'm finishing up a dissertation to get to a doctorate, and I have a really deep sense of purpose. And maybe this is why, because there's a lot of education. I've got that Latino background as well. I don't know. It's just fascinating to think about. Begin think about your own self in this. Okay. And here's the question I want you to think of when it comes to this. As you have gained more education, has your sense of purpose strengthened or lessened? So I want you to think about that for yourself. Do you believe you have a duty towards a purpose-driven life because you have more education? That's the key question right there I want you to really think about. Because you have more education, do you believe you have a duty towards a purpose-driven life? Or do you think it's okay to get a master's degree and go off and, just do whatever you want to do in life? Or is it that, hey, because I've gained all this education, I should have a greater sense of purpose in my life? So just something to think about. Again, this is one of these things. I wish we were in a live class, and this purpose class, we never, it's never been a live class. It's always online, but just the conversation that we could have around this data, I think would be fascinating. Neighborhood makes a small difference. So for you the younger ones in this class that are looking at where you're going to go in life and what city you're going to reside in, there's a great book out there. There's a great author. His name is Naval Ravikant, and he's got a book, The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. See, he's a billionaire. That's my understanding, is that he's a billionaire. And so he's got this great quote out there, and I don't have it with me, but he talks about the three most important decisions that you will make in life. One is who your partner is going to be. And I'll tell you, that's a very important decision for you to make, but I'm not the one who give you advice on that at all. But I'll tell you, that's one of the most important decisions to make. So find someone who's been married a long time and who has made really great decisions in that area of their life. Follow that person, listen to their advice on that one. And then I think they talk about the career that you choose, or this is what Nabal talks about, the career you choose. But then the third thing he says that was interesting to me, he says the city that you decide to reside in, right? So where you decide to put down roots is going to be one of the most important decisions that you make. And so I would encourage you to think about this, okay? Especially those of you who are in your 20s and you're not maybe weighed down by marriage and kids and responsibilities and a long-term career, all that kind of stuff. You can pick up and go. You don't have a mortgage to worry about. Really think about this before you decide where you're going to want to go. And my biggest advice to you is go somewhere where the work that you do, okay, it's revered, it's respected, and there's a ton of people doing it. You say, well, why would I go there? Why would I want to be a small fish in a big pond? Well, that's where you grow and that's where you learn. Okay. I definitely do not encourage you to go somewhere where you can be, at least to start. Okay. Starting out, go somewhere. And right now, in the back of my mind, for some reason, I'm thinking finance. For people who want to do finance, I'd recommend go to a really big, go to New York, go to, I mean, that's the only city on my mind. Maybe LA has got some, they've got some major finance centers up there, some major finance companies up there. And when I'm talking finance, I'm talking about like the mergers and acquisitions, private equity, all that kind of stuff. Chicago, probably even New York, Chicago, LA. Miami's got some of it as well, but I would say stay out of Miami if you're too young because there's too many distractions there. And and I would say the same thing for San Diego. When I hear young people saying, I'm just gonna, I'm gonna settle down in San Diego. I always tell men, go somewhere else first and then, do 2 or 3 years somewhere else in the big city. San Diego, yes, we're a bigger town, we're biggest, but we've got a small city kind of feel. I always say that this isn't necessarily the place you want to discover. Go to LA, go to Chicago, go to New York, go somewhere where it's frightening to live, right? And especially, but I would also think of, those of you who want to go into like nonprofit work, go somewhere where the need is massive and real. Now we have a lot of massive need here in San Diego. I will say that nonprofit, this is a great place to come. Our educational, our schools, our public schools are in need of really good teachers. Our nonprofits here in the area are in need of good workers. But I would almost challenge you to go somewhere like in LA, again, a Chicago, a New York City. Go where the need is so great, okay? And then come back to a place like San Diego. But now that you've been out there, you've experienced, homelessness. Yes, we have a lot of homelessness in San Diego, but there's even more up in Los Angeles, right? There's, the foster care system in Los Angeles, the educational system. There's so much work that needs to be done up there. So anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent here, but I'm thinking about when you were younger, make decisions, right? And so going back to finance, the reason why sometimes I hear people say that I'm going to graduate finance and hang out here in San Diego when you're in your 20s. I said, that's not a bad decision to make. But I'd say if you want to get to the top of your field, you got to get to New York City, right? You got to get to Chicago. You got to go to LA. But really the creme de la creme, that's New York City. That's like, it's one of the top financial capitals in the world, right? So whatever it is you want to do, if you want to be in the entertainment industry, why would you be in San Diego, California? Go to LA, right? Go to the heart of it. I'm trying to think of other industries out there. If you wanted to be in, I don't know, like the railroad industry, which I don't think I've never heard anybody say they want to do that. I'm just saying, go to where that's at, right? If you want to be in manufacturing, go to the city in America that has, or city around the world that, wherever that place may be, that really measures, strength when it comes to manufacturing. You get the point I'm trying to make. But watch this, okay? While the difference is small, less than 1/10 of a point, people who live in big cities reported higher purpose than other neighborhoods, small cities, suburban, and rural. Some argue that people in large metropolitan areas harbor extra. Okay, so if you live, and I would put San Diego in this, if you live in the San Diego area, or LA, or Chicago, New York, right? Miami, Houston, Texas, that's a big one. Dallas, Texas, right? You go to some of these bigger cities. Some argue that people that live in large metropolitan areas harbor extra self-importance compared to people in smaller cities or rural areas. Perhaps this mindset could bump up responses to questions like, I know how I can use my talents to make a meaningful contribution to the larger world, which can be more difficult to endorse for people who do not feel as much contact with the larger world. Look, I will tell you this, and this in my own life as I've gotten older. At one point in my life, there was a decision that I was going to make. I'm getting really transparent with you now, where it was going to be. I was living here in San Diego, California. I was thinking about maybe dating someone from a small town, and I just couldn't do it. It just something, and this person was amazing. I mean, just a great person. I've no nothing negative to say about the person, but there's something about a person who lives in a small town versus someone who lives in a big town, right? And I knew at the time that wasn't something that was going to happen because we just see the world so differently. When you're in a bigger city, there is a sense that you probably have, and maybe you've experienced that too, a sense of larger self-importance. Like, hey, man, I made it out here, right? I always tell people that. I don't care what your income level is in San Diego County or LA County. If you come out to Southern California, that means LA and below, okay? All the way down to Tijuana. If you come out from San Diego or LA, San Diego, Orange County, whatever, and you're making it, I don't care what your job title is, you're heads and shoulders above most people in the United States of America. Because LA, I mean, I think LA proper just has 18 million people. San Diego County has depends on who you listen to, between 3 to 4 million people. That's not even including Orange County, and then you've got the Inland Empire and Riverside, and just millions upon millions upon millions of people here in Southern California. If you can come out here and you can do it, you can make it, right? That says something about who you are as a person. And so I think maybe that has something to do with it. Okay. Now here are the numbers on this. So if you're from a rural area or suburban area, you report the same sense of purpose. Small city, you jump up just a point, or whatever that is of a point. I think it's just a point there, right? But then you go to a bigger city, and clearly there's a big difference between living in a bigger city. If you were younger in this program, I recommend get to a big city. San Diego can be it. Okay, again, you're living in Southern California, but I'd say, man, go on up, to LA. Spend some, even if it's just 2 or 3 years, and then you're going to get back to San Diego, or you want to go back to the hometown. Maybe some of you come from a smaller hometown, wherever you're from, and you want to get back there. Go live in a big city for 2 to 3 years, just because you know that you can do it, and it'll be something you put on your resume the rest of your life, and nobody can take it away from you. And you will have grown by leaps and bounds if you can put 2 to 3 years into a big city. I recommend going to a big city and just staying the rest of your life, going to a larger area and staying. I think that's incredibly rewarding. I grew up in a very small town, and being out here in San Diego County has been very rewarding, to be here in Southern California. But to each his own. But just so you know, if you want a greater sense of purpose, you'll find that in the city. The next one, okay? Or I guess here's a question. Why do you believe bigger cities reinforce a greater sense of purpose in people? That's one that I want you to think about, and think about your own journey there. Now, why I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one. It's 2024 in its political season. Strong political views are associated with stronger purpose. People with stronger political views report higher purpose in life than people with moderate. So let me just show you the data on this. Okay. If you are a liberal, okay, you have a stronger sense of purpose just by a little bit than anybody else. But watch, if you look at the map here, you can see very conservative and very liberal are right up there. Okay. You drop down if you're conservative, and you drop down even more if you're moderate, right? And maybe that, I don't know, maybe it has something to do with, if you've heard the saying before, if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything, right? If you've heard that before. And I think there's some truth to that. And you may not agree with liberals if you're conservative. You may not agree with conservatives if you're liberals, but maybe based on this, on the score here, we can say, well, I give props to both of them, because at least they're standing for something, right? They've got something that they're passionate about. But then it says, obviously, if you're liberal, and so when I hear liberal, but not very liberals, that's like progressive, in a lot of ways, very conservatives, that's like Tea Party. So if you've got, probably most of America lives in the three middle ones: moderate, liberal, conservative. less on the fringes, the very liberal and very conservative, but those are the higher, but those are high in purpose. But liberal would almost be people that I see. I always call them like the Clinton Democrats. Okay, so if you were, I was growing up in the '90s, so I remember Bill Clinton when he first came out in 1992, and I grew up in a very Republican city. It was a small town in Indiana, a very Republican state. Just everyone around me. But Bill Clinton was the first one who came along that made a lot of Republicans. He was an attractional candidate. He made being a Democrat look good, and so there were a lot of people who kind of were on the fence and kind of moved that in that direction. If you listen to a lot of what Bill Clinton says from the '90s and listen to him today, he sounds like a Republican today, right? But when I think of liberal, I think of people probably more on that end. I think a lot of our wealthier San Diego, Democrats are probably less progressive, but very liberal. These are the people that we're talking about. And, I don't have a lot of friends who run in that circle, but, the couple that I do, they are very purpose driven, right? They want to donate to as many causes as they can. They want to be out there volunteering as much as they can. They want to be in the community serving it. Because they have a strong sense of purpose. So anyway, I don't have any questions around that because it's politics and I don't want to get into it. So let's go to the next one. Okay, now let's look, and I think this is our last one here. People in some professions are more purposeful than others. Perhaps not surprisingly, people who work with or people who work to help others tend to score higher in purpose than those in other professions. Again, while it is tempting to attribute this difference to the jobs themselves, and there are indeed ways that some professions can make purpose-laden experiences easier to come by than others, the science of purpose suggests that anyone can introduce greater purpose into their life regardless of their occupation. That's an important sentence there. Anyone can introduce greater purpose into their life regardless of their occupation. So I'm going to show you a bunch of jobs right now, and this one's not going to surprise anyone. But no matter where you fall on the scale, you can, and I would highly recommend, put as much purpose as you can into whatever field you are in, whatever industry you're in. Okay. Anyone, regardless of demographics, education, politics, and more, can connect to what what they do to a broader worldly impact that transcends space and time. So if you squint your eyes a little bit, you can kind of read in there. So all the way down at the bottom there, which now this one did surprise me a little bit. Homemaker. Okay. So this is someone who a mom or a dad or a man or woman, whoever it is, stays at home and they take care of the home. They report the least amount of purpose. Okay. That's telling to me. And again, if we were in a class, I'm not going to have this conversation on my own, but if we were in a class, I'd want to talk about that. Okay. I will say this because the data is out there. Most divorces are initiated by women. And again, I'm not saying it's a bad or good thing. It just is. Okay. And I don't have the exact data around this, so I should be careful with what I say around this. But I want to say it's like 70% of divorces that are initiated by women. And then there's another stat behind it that says there's another giant number of those tend to be homemakers. And so I think there's something to be said about that. Okay. And there's something to be said about if that's maybe, something you want to do, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Okay. Being a homemaker, I want to make that clear that this is not an anti-homemaker kind of a thing. But I'd be curious if we had any homemakers in the class who could speak to this. Again, if we were having a class right now and somebody could speak out on this, why do they report a lower sense of purpose? That's interesting. But I will tell you that, again, when you look at the divorce rates and how many homemakers end up filing for divorce, maybe that has something to do with it. Watching your significant other, your spouse, your partner, whatever, go off to work every single day and go out and do something big, and then you're home just kind of managing the home, that could feel like there's a lower sense of purpose. And again, there's a larger conversation to have there as well. You go back to the 50s and 60s, and what did most women do? You go back to the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, right? What did most women do? They stayed home. Unless it was wartime, right? During wartime, they would go out and they work. But as soon as the men came home from war back in the World War I and World War II, the women returned back home and they just worked at home as dutiful people. But then we saw the backlash to that. What, in the 60s and 70s, right? We started seeing the social movements start to happen more. The divorce rate started to rise. Women started to divorce more. They started getting more into the workplace. So that's an interesting one there. Again, I don't want to say I said I wasn't going to talk too much about it. Here I am talking about it. I think that right there, that could lead to great conversation. It's just something for you to think about. Okay. Now, as you move up there, okay, you see a student 2.79, a greater sense of purpose. Your purpose, maybe it's because it's already set for you. Try to get good grades so you can get out of, being a student. Same for me. I'm finishing up my dissertation right now. Not a lot of purpose in that. I just want to get it done, to be honest with you. Management administration, that's interesting. Pretty low. Business and finance. And I find that one to be interesting because I think there's a lot of purpose that you can find in business and finance. But again, I wish we were in a room so we could discuss that one. That would be phenomenal. Law, you start getting a little more into healthcare, and I thought healthcare would be actually a little higher than that. But then you get into the high ones, and it's no surprise to anyone. The ones going above the 3.00 line, you've got construction, manufacturing. That's interesting. We just did a bunch of trainings for some construction supervisors back in the Midwest, and it was interesting. They had a sense of purpose. It was the buildings that they put together. They're very proud of those buildings that they're able to build. Politics, no surprise there. Military, law enforcement, nonprofit, spiritual, religious teacher. Those are our pastors, right? Education, you go all the way up. That's the second one, and there's no surprise there. I feel a strong sense of purpose, and I grew up in a family of educators. Maybe that's why some of that trickled down. And then mental health and social services. So what's interesting is in our leadership programs, our business and leadership programs, and we have business and leadership students who are taking this class, the purpose class. There are different ways to converse with each group, because I have found, again, this is just my experience, I have found that our leadership students really talk. When we talk about purpose, they're able to have that conversation a little bit more than our business students. And it makes sense when you look at the chart. Business, finance, you come all the way down. Management, administration, right? With that kind of mindset. It's not really about purpose. It's about the numbers. Let's get the job done. But then a lot of our leadership students are attracted to education and social services and nonprofit and the spiritual side of it. And so they talk a little bit more about it. So a question for you to consider on this one is this: why do you believe bigger cities? That's not the question. Where it is. Okay. Okay, so maybe I don't have a question there. Maybe I think I posted the wrong PowerPoint there. So the question the question centered around what we just saw in that statement. So let's come back to that statement there, and I'll just give you the question from this. That statement there, that there are indeed ways that some professions. No. Okay, the science of purpose suggests that anyone can introduce greater purpose into their life, regardless of their occupation. Even if you're smaller on the scale, okay, on that scale that we just looked at, how can you introduce a greater sense of purpose into your work, right? So let's say you're in the class and you are management, business, finance, okay? How can you do that more? Let's say you're sales and rhetoric. How can you put more in, okay? So this question really is for those maybe who are on the lower end of this scale right here. And it's just to give you a chance to reflect and say, how can you introduce a greater sense of purpose into your work? Now, here's the question. Everyone needs to answer this question, okay? And I actually should have just put that on there. Everyone has to answer this question. How does knowing this information impact your own journey towards purpose? Okay, so everything that we just looked at, how does knowing all of this impact your own journey towards purpose? Does it change it? Does it make it different? Does it make you look at it, a little bit more differently? How does knowing the information that we just looked at, how does it change or how does it impact your own journey towards purpose? Hey, everybody, I am it's been fun to read your assignments. It's been fun to read the work that you're doing. Very proud of you in this class. Again, I'm not commenting too much because I'm focusing on, we just moved into a new place, and I'm focusing on all my dissertation, so I don't have as much chance to kind of look through your stuff, but or not look through it to write through your stuff, but I'm looking through it for sure, and I'm really proud of the work that you're doing. So keep up the great work. And I hope that this is just helping to add value as you're seeking out what your purpose could and should be on this journey that we called life. Hey, thanks so much for listening. I'll see you next week for another episode of the Prof JC Leadership Podcast. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out if you need me. Take care and make sure that you're enjoying your summer as the weather gets nicer out there. I'll see you soon.